So go ahead and jump to your Assets module folder. And in the Steps folder, let's go ahead and open up the 14th and last step, which is called Managed Private Files. And go ahead and copy the entire code and paste it over the code that's currently in your assets.module file and save it. Just like with our previous example when we were working with unmanaged files and we switched over to using the private file system, what we've done in this file is changed all of the schemas from public to private. So if we do a search, let's do a quick search here for private. We see here we have it changed. These are for unmanaged. Let's go ahead and scroll down to the managed section here. See that we've changed it in our upload location in assets managed file form. We've also changed it in our display files page and in our load files and also in our delete callback. Okay. Besides this, the only change that we've made is we've added some code in our hook file download. I'm going to scroll up to that. Okay, here we go. Previously, what we had for our unmanaged files was this. If you remember, what we did was we did a check here to make sure that our path was in the assets managed folder. And if so, then we did a check for user access. And again, this would only pass for the user1 user because this permission doesn't exist yet. And next we created a file object and loaded in some data for it so we could pass it to file get content headers. And once we had that, we would go ahead and return that. And if the user didn't have access, but the file was inside of this particular directory, we were going to return -1 to prevent the user from accessing the file. Okay, so here's the logic that we added for the managed files. This first line is pretty similar. The only thing that we've changed is the folder name. So instead of unmanaged, we are now in managed. We're doing the permission check. And if that passes, then instead of building our file object, what we can do is use a function called file load multiple. And we used this before, but in this case, what we're doing is passing an empty array as the first parameter. And the second parameter is a set of conditions that we're passing to file load multiple. And this is basically a simplified version of what we did earlier with the full-on query. But the reason why we had to build the query before was because this only checks for equal operators. So the URI has to equal this, and we can use that as a simple condition to pass to file load multiple. But before we were checking for a partial name. And in order to check for that, we had to use the starts with condition. And in order to use that, we had to use the entity query class. So this will pull out all of the files that match it. We're expecting only one to match it, so we can sort of count on that. If there's at least one in this files that are returned, then we're going to loop through them. And if the URI equals the URI that's getting passed to the hook, then we're going to go ahead and return the file headers for this file. And we don't have to build the file object, we just had to fetch it using the file load multiple. So all of this stuff that we had to do for the unmanaged file, we get to skip. And then finally, we're returning a -1 if the user doesn't have access, but they're trying to access a file in this particular directory. Okay, let's go ahead and make sure that this is saved. And we'll jump back to the browser and we'll just test this out now that we're using a private file system. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and upload a couple of files here. And then let's go ahead and check out the thumbnails. Okay. Now these files are now being served through the private file system. Okay, before we wrap up this section on working with files in the File API, there's just a couple other things I wanted to cover. First of all, because the private file system is such a heavy load on the server, but it can be a really great resource if you're trying to create a paywall in front of certain content or allow protected content for certain users, there's a module that you can install in Apache that will allow you to bypass the chunking PHP serving of the file itself and allow you to perform the validation checks in PHP and then pass it on over to Apache. And that module is called xsendFile. And so I wanted to cover a little bit about how to configure it. It's pretty simple. And then also show you how to test for whether it's working or not. And then finally, I wanted to take you on a quick tour of a stream wrapper so you can see from the back end what it looks like, kind of demystify it. It's pretty simple, but stream wrappers can be pretty extensive in terms of code. So I just wanted to break it down a little bit so you knew what was going on behind the scenes.